If you are interested in game development or love visual novel adventure games, you are in the right place. I've taken on a new challenge, making my own visual novel adventure game inspired by Ace Attorney. I'll be using the Godot game engine to build a dialog interface that captures the essence of Ace Attorney's iconic style. In this video, I'll be showing you the first steps of my development journey. Let's dive in. Hi, I'm Anis and welcome to the first devlog of my visual novel adventure game. I'm still figuring out the name that the game will have, but for now we'll just call it. Let me tell you a little bit about me first. I'm fairly new to game development. I've done a few tutorials of Godot and Unity over the past couple of years, but it's only recently that I've started to take it more seriously. Don't expect any pro-level techniques here. I'm mostly piecing things together and hoping they work. My real job has nothing to do with game development, by the way. I work as an AI engineer, and I happen to be living in Japan. Alright, that's enough about me. Let's get to the good stuff. If you know a little bit about game engines, you might be wondering why I'm going with Godot instead of the more popular options like Unity and RenPy, which is known for visual novels. And there are a few reasons to that. First reason is, I want to. Simple as that. Unity does have more resources, but I was more drawn to Godot. The second reason is the community. I've done a few tutorials the past few months, and immediately I fell in love with the interface, with the community, with how fast it's been growing. It's like the Blender of the game dev world, and as a big Blender fan, it felt just right. Lastly, the game I'm making is more of a puzzle adventure type of game, with interactive elements that require programming. So RenPy would have been fine if it was just a simple, straight-up visual novel, but with the flexibility that I need, I've chosen to go with Godot. If you've tried Unity or Unreal before, you might know what I mean when I say that those can feel a little bit intimidating, but Godot, on the other hand, I think is very beginner-friendly. It has a very simple interface. It's not going to overwhelm you with a million advanced features. It just lets you snap things together and make a game very quickly. Now, let's talk money. If you're dreaming of making big bucks with your first indie game, first of all, you need to chill. Also, Godot takes a suspiciously low cut for each sale. Unlike Unity's tier pricing and revenue sharing models, Godot takes a grand total of 0%. That's right, nothing, nada. It's your money. However, if monetization is your main concern as a solo game developer, I think it's usually safer to lower your expectations and just enjoy the process of creating your first video game. Programming in Godot happens in the engine itself. They have their own programming language called GDScript, and if you've never coded anything before or if you're a beginner, don't worry. GDScript really resembles Python, a language argued to be one of the easiest to learn. Godot's syntax is pretty much like caveman English. Coding on the editor is useful for several reasons. Everything you need is in one application. You don't need to juggle multiple different softwares. You have the amazing drag and drop functionality that allows you to drag something from the interface directly onto your code. You have the real-time syntax checking that catches errors as you go, and you also have the internal debugging tool and much more. Coding within the editor also provides you with instant access to the documentation. You can simply control-click or command-click on a class name to explore its details. This might seem anecdotal at first, but trust me, if you're new to game dev or Godot in general, you will need to open their documentation pretty much all the time. For example, you can quickly find functions like isOnFloor for character movement or instance for spawning objects. Additionally, Godot's documentation is a treasure trove, packed with comprehensive tutorials, examples, and guides that make your learning experience and troubleshooting much easier. Let's keep rolling. Like I said at the start of this YouTube video, the main inspiration for the game I want to make is a series of games called Ace Attorney. If you haven't heard of the Ace Attorney series, or Gyakuten Saiban in Japanese, it's this really popular set of games where you step into the shoes of a defense attorney named Phoenix Wright. Now, I know that playing as a defense attorney might not sound super exciting at first, but here's the thing. It's obviously not a realistic take on what a defense attorney does. You just have to look at one of those real lawyer reacts to Phoenix Wright videos to realize that he takes wild liberties with pretty much everything. Honestly, Phoenix Wright is more of a detective than a lawyer. Unlike most visual novels, an Ace Attorney game typically asks for a lot more player involvement. You're moving around, investigating complex cases, gathering evidence, and eventually participate in these intense courtroom battles, cross-examining witnesses, and ultimately shouting objection at just the right moment to expose the truth. The games are famous for their intricate storylines and their cast of super expressive and quirky characters that draw you in. Each character has only a limited set of poses, but they manage to convey a lot of emotion with just a few movements. The characters you cross-examine often have these epic meltdown animations that only trigger when you expose their lies, giving you a real sense of accomplishment. If this piques your interest, definitely check out the animation of Phoenix Wright by New Frame Plus. They break down why the animation in these games is so clever and why it's such a visual treat. Alright, so if we want to mimic the basic feel of an Ace Attorney game, how should we proceed? Let's take this in for reference and proceed analytically. Okay, so we have a background image, a character artwork, often referred to as sprite in this case, a dialog box with a line of dialogue, the name of the character currently speaking, a little cursor telling you that you can proceed to the next line of dialogue, and two buttons, options and court record, which open menus. If you've played any visual game before, this is all quite common. There's nothing particularly unique to it. Ace Attorney keeps it simple, because its strength relies elsewhere, and that's where they want you to pay attention. There are two things that give Ace Attorney a lot of charm. There's of course the animation of the character sprite, and you have the text, which is dynamically revealed in a typewriter effect, accompanied by little sounds. I think they're called text bleeps. Another interesting observation here is that these text bleeps sometimes change depending on the character speaking. I wanted this video to have a little educational value to it, so I've included a little Godot tutorial on how to make a visual novel UI like Ace Attorney. It's quite long, so it will be divided into several parts, and you're about to see the first one. If you're not very interested in learning Godot, you can skip ahead to the end of the video, where I talk a little bit about my game. Alright guys, so I'm here in Godot. I've just created a new project here. As you can see, I'm using the version 4.2.2 stable. And so what I'm going to show you is obviously all stuff that I've already done for my own visual novel game before this video, but I just want to show you how easy it is to set up a UI that resembles Ace Attorney's and how intuitive the software can feel to use. So we're going to rebuild the Ace Attorney UI inside of Godot in what I hope to be 5 to 10 minutes. So I'm going to pull up my reference here that I prepared for this video. There we go. So as I've said before, we have the character artwork, we have the background image, the dialog box, the speaker name, and then this little cursor here that indicates that you can go to the next line of dialogue, right? So we're going to recreate all of this very simply inside of Godot. And the first thing we want to do, checking our reference, is set up our background image, right? So we're going to create a new scene, 2D scene, because this is a 2D game. I'm going to push Control A to add a new node. What you can also do is right-click, add child node, and we're going to be looking for something called a texture rect, which is right here. So this is always what you want to have for background. There is something else called a color rect, which we could also use if we just had a flat color for the background, but in this case we have an image. And if we have an image, we want to use texture rect. So I'm going to add this. So it appears right here in the top left corner of my screen. And as you can see, it already has a size here, 40 by 40 pixels, but it doesn't have the image yet. So we're going to add the image right now. I'm going to drag and drop this into my project here. And right off the bat, what I like to do here is keep everything very clean by adding folders. So I'm going to add a folder named assets and just drop my image into it. Now, I can drag and drop that image into the texture field of my texture rect. And as you can see, the resolution of my image isn't quite the same as the viewport. So in order to fix this, we could technically just manually resize the image. You know, you could grab it here and resize it this way. We can also change the size here in the inspector. I'm not going to do this because if I do it this way, actually I can just show you. There you go. This is me just resizing it manually. I'm going to save my scene and I'm going to execute the game. And you can see that if I resize the screen of my game here, the background image stays the same size. And this is not the behavior that we want the background to have. We want the background to just cover the whole screen no matter what the size is, right? So an easy way to deal with this is, so I'm going to revert the size back to its original value. An easy way to deal with this is to add something called a canvas layer. So we're going to add our texture rect inside of it, and clicking on texture rect, we're going to come up here to anchor preset, and we're going to choose full rect. And this is what's going to allow us to cover the whole screen at all points. I can show you by executing the game again, and you can see here that if I resize my screen, the background will follow and do its best to, resize itself to cover everything. So pulling up my reference again, we can see that we have a character that roughly takes about, I don't know, like 1/3 of the screen, and it's like placed in the middle. I could do right click and add something in the scene, but if you're working with Godot, you always want to make it a habit of creating new scenes, like new nodes for things that you want to reuse. So if I create something here, it's not gonna make me able to reuse that element later on. So I'm going to create a new scene and then import it into my main scene. So new scene, a 2D node yet again, and in this case, to have our character, the character is just, if you look at the reference, it's really just an artwork, right? So we're going to do Control A to add a new node, and we're going to come up to node 2D, and you can see here that Godot has what we want here in the shape of a sprite 2D. But in Ace Attorney, if I play the video, you see that the character is animated, right? And Godot actually has something like specifically made for animation, and it's very simply called an animated sprite 2D. So this is what we're going to be using instead. I'm going to add this, and then I'm going to come up to the animation panel here, and I'm going to create new sprite frames. Click on it, and we have our panel here at the bottom that will allow us to create our animation very simply. So traditionally speaking here, you would use something called a sprite sheet with all of the frames that your animation has. I do not have a sheet, but I do have multiple PNG images that can build the animation for me. So I found this on the internet for the sake of this video. So you can see here that I have 5 frames that correspond to the animation that I want to create. So I'm going to drag and drop this folder inside of my project, conveniently add it inside of my assets folder. I'm going to open up my idle frames folder. I'm going to select everything, and I'm going to drag and drop them here. And believe me or not, this is all that we need to do to create our animation. I can show you by very simply clicking on the play button here. There we go. So it's just looping through all 5 frames, right? Very simply speaking. I'm going to stop the loop animation, and I'm going to make it just a little bit faster, maybe 10. That's a bit too fast. Let's say 8. All right. That seems like a nice speed for the eyes blinking. So I'm going to leave it like that. I'm going to rename this animation idle, and we can create a new animation if we want here called talking. So this would be the animation that we would use when the character is actually talking. So if he's idle, if he's in idle position, it's just blinking. But if he's talking, he's also moving his mouth, right? So I have the frames for that as well in this folder. So same thing. I'm just gonna select all of my frames, and I'm gonna drag and drop them here. I'm gonna stop the loop animation. I'm gonna make it 8 FPS as well, and we're gonna give it a go. Play. There we go. So the animation is working exactly as we want it to. And this is pretty much all we need to do for the character. So before saving the scene, I'm going to rename Node2D character, and then I'm going to press Control S to save my scene. I'm going to press save here. There we go. Now that we have made our character, we can close this, and back on the main scene, we can drag and drop the character scene directly into our main scene here, right? So drag and drop. Now, as you can see, we cannot actually see the character, but it is here. You can see that if I hide my canvas layer here by clicking on the eye icon, it is actually here. The problem is that since we are using canvas layer, those work with, like, typically speaking, if I position something below another node, you should be able to see it rendered on top of it, but canvas layer works with layers, as the name indicates. So what we're going to do here is just change the value of the layer, and we're going to put like a negative value, because this is the background and it should always be displayed behind everything anyway. So this is the behavior that we want, right? Now, we can see our character. It is a little bit small compared to the artwork, compared to the reference, I mean. A lot smaller, actually. So I'm going to make it a little bit bigger by coming up here to the transform section. And the scale value, I'm going to make it maybe 3 times as big. So as I said, I don't have a very high resolution asset, but this will do the trick for our video, right? Now, I could just place it manually in the center like this, but if I do this, we're going to run into the same issue that we did with the background before, right? So I can show you by executing the game. The character will stay exactly where I placed him. So if I resize, the character just stays at the same spot because it's using the world coordinates and not the window size. So we can fix this very easily by adding another node. So essentially every UI element that you want to be placed at a specific location in your screen requires what we call control nodes in Godot. So we're going to come up here to our node 2D scene. I'm going to do Control A, and right here they always have a green icon. You have the control nodes here. So everything inside of this has attributes that will allow us to control the exact position of our elements a lot more easily than if we were to use normal nodes like Node 2D or Node 3D, right? So we're going to create another canvas layer actually before I do anything for the elements that will be positioned above this canvas layer. I'm going to move my character above this. I'm going to create a new node called control, and we're going to use this to position our character into the scene. So I'm going to click on control here, and if you look at the reference, the character is always positioned at the center of the scene, right? So the first thing you could think of doing is in the control node here, coming up to layout, and in the anchor preset, we could click on center to have it always to have our control node always centered in the scene. Now, our character at work got moved to another location. That's because it has a position of its own, and now the position became relative to the parent, the control node. So we can just put it back to 0, and now we have our character here in the center, and we could move it back a little bit here. Actually, I'm just going to change the Y value. There we go. Save, and you would think that maybe that would do the trick. Unfortunately, it does not, and I will show you why. If I resize, as you can see, it doesn't stay in the bottom because the anchor is center, and what we actually want is center bottom. And fortunately, we have this setting as well. So we're going to do that. We're going to reposition our character like so. And now that the anchor is central bottom, the character will stay at the central bottom position of the screen no matter what. And this works as well if we are trying to do some sort of like mobile game, sort of like screen size ratio, as you can see. So it's always at the center bottom part of the screen, which is the behavior that we want the character artwork to have. So this is perfect. Now, we're going to move on to the next step, which is the dialog box. So for the dialog box, we're going to create a new node inside of Node 2D. And for this, everything that is sort of like a container in Godot is usually, it would be contained inside of something called a panel. So this is actually a child of control. And we have two types of panels. We have the normal panel, and we also have something called a panel container, which is right there. So the difference is that the panel is literally just a frame with a style, and the panel container actually has attributes that we can use to precisely control the position of its children, right? So this is obviously better for our situation here because we're going to put some text and a cursor inside of our dialog box. So panel container is exactly what we want to use. I'm going to add this to my scene, and I'm going to make it a child of the second canvas layer. Now we want this panel to kind of like cover the bottom part of the screen, as you can see here in the reference. Just kind of like spreads across the whole width and has a little bit of height. So what we can do here is, since it's already inside of a canvas layer, actually we already have a control node that places things at the central bottom part for us, right? So we could make it a child of control, and then on the layout section we could choose. So we have something specifically made for this called bottom wide. So if we do this, we have several problems. The first problem is that it's completely flat. Also, it doesn't spread the whole width, and this is because the parent doesn't do that either. This is the size of the parent, and it doesn't cover the whole width of the screen. And you could technically go there and do bottom wide, but if you do this, it's going to mess up the position of our character. So this is actually not what we want to do. We want to keep it at center bottom. The size of this control actually doesn't matter much because it's just acting as an anchor for our character that I'm going to replace. There we go. And a very easy way to have our panel container be sized the way we want is just to have it parented to canvas layer 2. Now we can go up there to bottom wide, And you can see that now it actually spreads across the whole screen like we want to. So the only thing we have to do is just to give it a little bit of size. So I'm going to change its custom minimum size value here. There you go, to give it a little bit of height. Let's say maybe 100 pixels, maybe a bit more. Let's do 150. There we go. So this is about the size that we want to have for our dialog, and I'm going to rename that dialog box. There we go. Now we still need to add the speaker name box and the little cursor, and in a way all of those elements, the speaker and the cursor and the dialog box itself, all of this is part of the same game element, because we want them to move together and stay at the same position. So they could be part of the same game element called a dialog UI, for example. So I actually went a little bit fast by creating the dialog box first, but it's no big deal. We can just create a new scene here called a dialog UI. So I'm going to actually make it a control node and not a node 2D, because in this specific case we actually want to position everything at a specific location of the screen. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to just rename it dialog UI, and I'm going to copy this with Control C and paste it here. So it's already positioned like we want him to, because it has the same attributes here. So this is perfect. Now we're going to add another panel for the speaker name, panel container. There we go. And we're going to give it a size approaching the one of the reference. So my thinking is it's a little bit big. I'm going to go 50 and maybe 200 across. And the anchor for this node should be attached to the left side of the screen, right? Because it's always going to be attached to this part. So for this, I guess any sort of like left anchor will do the job. So we're going to be clicking here on the layout mode. We're going to choose anchor, and we're going to choose bottom left, just to have an easier time positioning it. And from that point I can change its position to where I want him to be. So I'm going to put it right above the dialog box. There we go. I am going to save my scene. I'm going to rename this speaker box. Now the last element for our UI is the little cursor, this little thing here. And I do have an image for this as well, but I realized a little bit before that it's actually not a transparent background. It has a black background, so I can't actually use that, because you would be able to see the black part, and that's not what I want. But it's no big deal. Since it's just a white triangle, we can just very easily recreate it inside of Godot. So I'm going to go up to my dialog UI, and I'm going to create what we call a polygon 2D. There we go. So we can't see anything yet because there's no points describing that polygon. But I'm going to go up to data, and I'm gonna add some points here to the polygon. I'm going to add 3 points from a triangle. So the first can stay here. The second has to be a little bit lower. Let's say 50, and across, so 200 maybe. It's a bit much. Let's say 50 and then 25. And then the last point will be 55, will be a double the height of the previous point, and we have ourselves a little triangle, right? So like before, if I just take this node and reposition it like this, it's not actually going to stay here at the bottom part, because it's not parented to a control node. So I will create a new control node. I'm going to place it inside of this, and I'm going to use that control node here to have a bottom right anchor for my little cursor right there. Come up to my cursor. We're gonna return its position to 0. From that point onward, we can position it like we want, and because it is parented to by a control node, it's going to actually stay here, because now its position is relative to this control node. We're going to save. There we go. Now, if we go back to our main scene, we don't actually need this dialog box anymore, because we created a new element called a dialog UI, and that's what we're going to use instead. There we go. So I'm going to do some very quick readjusting here. So I'm going to position this a little bit lower so it actually touches the dialog box, and I'm going to make my cursor smaller. I'm going to do maybe 40 by 20, and then here we're going to do 40 as well. So that's a little bit better. And I'm gonna position this roughly at the bottom right there. Okay. I'm gonna save my scene. Now we're pretty much done with the main UI. We can adjust the overall look. The dialog box actually looks like the reference, coincidentally, because it's already like it's black with some sort of like transparency to it. So this is nice, but we can change its appearance to add the little bluish border here that the reference has. I'm gonna go here, and everything that has to do with appearance, usually you want to, like usually it's gonna be either theme or theme override, right? So the difference between the two is that if you think you're going to change the appearance for just this one game element, you can just change the theme override. But if this is information that you're gonna reuse in other game elements, like if you think you're gonna use other panel container with the same appearance, you should use theme, right? So I'm just gonna use theme just for the sake of showing you guys how it works. It works by creating a new theme. I'm going to save it right away. I'm going to go up there and do save, new theme. That's fine. Now I'm going to click on it, and this is where we're going to change the appearance of our game elements. I'm going to click on the plus, search for panel container, because this is the element that we want to customize. I'm going to go up here, and the panel here, I'm going to click on the plus to override the default appearance. I'm going to click on new style box flat to customize it the way I want it, the way I want to. So then I'm going to click on it, and we can freely change its appearance here on the top right. So I'm going to put it back to being black with a high transparency, maybe 150. There we go. And I'm going to add my border here. So it's actually just on the top part of the panel. So I'm just going to go top 1, and so we have a white border here, as you can see, and I'm going to make it a different color on here, border. So we want something a little bit bluish. So I'm going to bring everything back down, bring this one up like this. I'm going to make it transparent as well, maybe with the same value. And I think it's a little bit too blue, actually. I'm going to quickly adjust this. There we go, a bit like this. All right, this will do. So now, if you're using a theme, you don't actually want it to be applied to just this one element. Typically speaking, you would just apply to the whole scene, so that every child node has the same theme. So I'm gonna remove it from this element, and I'm just gonna apply it to the dialog itself. Here on theme, you can do quick load, find my theme, and as you can see, my dialog box has the theme that I described, and the speaker box as well, because the speaker box is also a panel container. Now, unfortunately, it's not actually the way we want the speaker box to look, so we're going to remedy to this very quickly. Now, see, I made a panel container here to show you that although in the reference it's not exactly a rectangle, we can cheat and make something approaching with a panel container. So I can override the theme by clicking on a new style block flag, and obviously theme override will override any theme that this element has, right? So we have a new box that we're going to change to actually the same blue color that we had for this element here. So I'm just going to pull up my theme again, and I'm going to copy past the X value of this color. I'm going to put it here for the color of this element, and then I'm actually going to tweak the borders and the corners to approach the shape that we saw. So it's actually not like it's the top right corner that is not exactly the same as the others, right? So I could go up to the top right here, add some radius, and then reduce the corner detail to have something like heart shaped like this. The problem if we do this is that we don't actually have a really good control on it. As you can see here, if I change those values, it's really hard to customize it the way we want. So this is not actually what we want to do. Like, the panel container doesn't have enough flexibility to allow us to customize the appearance the way we want to. So I'm going to transform this into, so change type, I'm going to transform this into a simple control, because I don't care for the panel itself. It's just going to be, I just want the positional information of it, right? So I still have my speaker box, and I'm going to create a polygon 2D to define the shape of it. So same as before, we go up to data. I'm going to create 4 points this time. So the second point will be a little bit across. Then we're going to be across and down. And then we're going to be back to the original position and down, right? There we go. I'm going to change the color to the blue that I had. And now I can actually tweak the positional value of my top right corner the way I want to. So this is the second point, right? So I can just change the value of this very easily, as you can see. There we go. So I'm going to do something like maybe 180. There we go. I'm gonna save. And this is enough for the appearance of it, right? So I'm just going to position it exactly at the edge here. There we go. Gonna save my scene. I'm gonna tweak the blue color a little bit actually, because it's not exactly what we want to have. Something more like this. And I'm gonna copy this and put it for my other panel as well. Right there. Confirm. Just so we have the same blue everywhere. There we go. Now we can now add the label to represent the speaker name very easily. I'm just going to add a label here. I'm going to type something here just to have a word. I'm going to write name. We want the name to be positioned roughly at the center of our speaker box, right? So we're going to go up to layout. We're going to choose anchor and center. There we go. Now to change the appearance of the label, I can create a new label settings, and this is where you can tweak everything, right? So I'm gonna make it just a little bit bigger, maybe 25, and I have a font that I prepared for this as well, right here. So I'm gonna drag and drop this folder as well, and I put it into my assets. And now that it's here, Godot will detect it automatically if I just do quick load, as you can see. All right, so it has my font. And we have our speaker label. Now, the only thing remaining is the line of dialog itself. And for this, we're actually going to use a different node. So let's click on the dialog box, Control A, and on the drop down here, we have label, but we also have something called a rich text label. And this is what we're going to use for several reasons. I'm going to add it. And we have, like, essentially we have a lot more freedom with this than we do with the label, because a rich text label allows you to have multiple fonts within the same text block. You can have scroll, for example. If you look here, it supports scroll. You can also use BBC code to customize the appearance of the text. So I'm just going to show you. This is a line of dialogue, and BBC code allows you to very easily write something in bold by adding the corresponding tag. It's actually just B, my bad. There we go. So we have our word in bold. We can also do italic with an I. And the cool thing is it also has built-in animations. I can do wave, for example. There we go. And there's another one that I know called shake. There we go. So there are a bunch of things really cool about rich text dialogue, and this is essentially preferred for the actual dialogue, since even in Ace Attorney game, very often the text here will change color, or it will be bold. It's going to be shaking, things like that, right? So this allows you to put in all those effects really easily. And what I actually want to modify instead of the rich text dialogue is inside of this. It's the display text. As you can see here, we have a visible character attribute, and if it's -1, that just means display all the text. But if it has anything else than that, I'm going to put, for example, 1. This is the number of characters that is going to display, and this is what we're going to use to animate the text, like it is in Ace Attorney, just like that, right? So this is something we'll do later on. I'm going to put it back to -1 for now. I'm going to change the appearance of that text through my theme. Actually. I'm going to click back on here, on my theme, and I'm going to add rich text label. And I'm just going to be using the same font that I've been using for my label. So I'm going to come up here to this panel, and I'm going to click on the plus here and quick load the same font that I used. And for this, I can also override the size here. I'm going to make something maybe like 40. Seems good. And we want to reposition this a little bit better, because this is like it's just sticking to the edges of our panel, and this is not really what we want. So a way to deal with this is to go back on our panel container and to add some margins, right? So not expand the margins, because this would make our element bigger. We actually want to change the content margins here. So I'm going to do 40, 20, 40, and 20 to position it a little bit better. There we go. Now we're going to come back on our main scene and execute once again. And there we go. We have rebuilt the basic UI of Ace Attorney. Alright, so in the next video, I'm actually going to show you guys how to do the fun stuff. So the character animation and the dialogue animation. Hopefully you like this little introduction to adventure visual novel games on Godot. While I'm calling this a devlog, I'm voluntarily choosing not to divulge too much information at the moment because it's still in the early stages. Just know that the game I'm making is an adventure visual novel involving a lot of player interactivity. And here's a little sneak peek. The player will have the power to detect lies within people's words and probe them to see the hidden meaning behind. The game will have you interact with time travelers, and the main objective is to identify the person responsible for any event that disrupted the timeline. I hope I can explain all of this in more details in a future video. If you are interested in learning Godot yourself, it's very easy. You can start by typing Godot on YouTube. The content has been blooming the past couple of years. You can try out the Action RPG tutorial by Heartbeast. This is how I personally started to learn Godot and what got me hooked on it. You can also check out Brackeys, who's considered the Jesus of game development tutorials. He made a Godot tutorial a few months ago that's almost at 2 million views, and it's fully deserved. If you want to keep learning about Godot on this channel, follow the progress of my game, or simply share your thoughts, feel free to subscribe or leave a comment down below. Finally, for those interested in 3D modeling, you can also follow me on social media to see what I enjoy creating with Blender. See you in the next video!